Welcome to this episode of MMA from London to LA. I'll be the host today, Lord Colin Crandall, with my great mates here, Sir Callum Sanderson, and England's most respected fight promoter, Mr. Chris
Always.
Allen. How are you guys doing today, mates? I'll start with you, Callum. How's everything, Callum?
Good. Tired after staying up and watching the UFC, but what a card, man! What a card! I'm buzzing. Really, I'm buzzing.
Absolutely. Me too. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, man, all good. I didn't stay up late. I can't do that. I always think I'm going to stay up late, and then it starts at 1 a.m. the prelims, and then I fall asleep in half an hour. So
Yep.
it's like, so I woke up this morning and just watched them all on my phone. You know what I mean? Before I even got up, and didn't take long to be honest with you
Yes,
to watch all the fights. So
no.
Don't you get scared that someone's gonna spoil it for you or anything? Because I'm in quite.
that's why I don't look at nothing.
I rate it. I rate it.
Yeah, mate, look at us with the football scores. Yeah, if I haven't watched football, I avoid the scores all day and watch match of the day.
Yeah.
Colin, match of the day is somewhere where they have all the football games on, like which are on that day, the highlights of all of them
Yeah.
on one show. Yeah, man.
I like that.
I rate it.
How
And
did
people
your
know
team
if they spoil it for me as well, they know I won't talk to them. So.
Exactly. I used to have a friend do that back in the answering machine days. I would tell him, "Don't tell me anything about the fights," and he was kind of one of these guys who was a little bit out of his head, out of his mind a lot. And he would forget that I'd come back home and I'd press the button, and it would go beep, and he would say, "Colin, I can't believe it. I'm watching this prelim fight. So and so's doing this." And it beep, and then I feel like I'm going to turn this off. Did you forget I didn't want any spoilers? Oh yeah, I forgot. But man, oh man, I'll tell you what a great day. I for the UFC and for MMA in general. I remember looking at the fights and breaking them down earlier in the week after we had done our last show. And I remember looking and seeing that they had a lot of people with records of finishes, high finish percentages. And so I had a feeling it would go this way. What I didn't expect, as I think most of us didn't as well, is that there would be 6 upset winners, 6 underdogs out of 13 fights. In fact, word out of Buckingham Palace is that between King Charles and Prince William, they've lost so much money, they're looking for flatmates or to possibly rent out a couple of the rooms there. So I don't know if you guys have an interest in Buckingham Palace, but you might be there might be some availability there for you if you did. Robbie Lawler was the underdog here. The odds makers felt that Nico Price would just be too much for him the way Robbie's looked lately. And Robbie did end up coming out like a house on fire. And in his final fight, win or lose, took it to Nico Price, finished him off there. And then it was a very sentimental finish, him with Joe Rogan. I think they surprised him by having this 3-minute or so montage of clips of his great fights and announcing him, and he got very choked up there, and it was a very cool moment. I thought I felt bad for Nico Price because I know Nico trained hard. I know some people have been training with him, and I know he would have wanted to have won that fight there, but Robbie was very motivated. Robbie hits very hard. His technique is very good. I think it's just that a lot of people have been wrestling him, which was never his really strong suit, although he wasn't bad at it. And I think a lot of guys have just been outspeeding him and using a bit more quickness. And I think whether it was just that Nico made a mistake or the fact that just Robbie was so motivated and just got it done quickly. But Robbie Lawler looked like his old self for a brief minute there, and though did retire an amazing career on him. I remember watching him in the early days. I think he was the first UFC fighter featured in Sports Illustrated, I believe it was.
Man. It was when he had hair.
Yes, a lot of hair. Yep. and that was a very big accomplishment, and because no one was paying attention to MMA. This is going back 21 years, and so he was. He had a 22-year career, and I think he was in the UFC from the age of 19 to the age of 42, with a few fights outside the UFC, but mostly in the UFC. What a brilliant career! Great tough guy, great champion, And can't say enough about Robbie Lawler, originally out of the Pat Miletich camp, and then for many years out of American Top Team, and then I forget where he ended up, but a great fighter, double tough guy. What do you guys think?
man. Robbie Lawler's legend, man. Like you said, it's like he went back to the days of having hair. I always called it Robbie Lawler. Like that night, he went back to. It's like he finished the way he began. Just finishing people brutally, and because obviously as his career's gone on, he seems to be getting into like more and more wars. Like we can all remember the Rory McDonald fight and stuff like that. And yeah, man, the wars were coming a bit more, and he just showed tonight that I might be 42. I could probably do another couple of fights, but why would you? How many guys retire on their back? Tragically. So I'm happy for him, and I'll tell you what, when they played that montage and you could see him holding back those tears, man, it gave me goosebumps, man. I was like, man, that hit me hard. I felt like an emotional wreck almost. I was like, oh, don't cry, don't be a pussy. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But Robbie Lawler, man, since I've watched UFC, like MMA, he's been in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's been somewhere in there. So yeah, man, it's just fair play to him. He knew when the time was up, and I'm sure he's made plenty of money, and the UFC will sort him out for sure. So yeah, mate, good for him. Gutted for Nico, but you know what I mean. It is what it is. If you're going to lose to anyone, at least you lost to Robbie Lawler.
Absolutely. Callum, what was your feeling and takeaway?
Yeah, I echo a lot of what you both said. I just remember watching him walk out to the cage. I'm like, I've never seen him emotional. Like, even in interviews and everything, he's just so stoic. And then he's walking out and you're like, I wonder if the moment's going to get to him, because it's a massive moment. Let's be honest. It's a massive moment for him. The fight starts. He does what he does. If I'm not mistaken, it's his quickest victory in like the UFC, or maybe in his career or something like that.
May have been.
And like you're thinking, Nico Price, he's a warrior. This is going to be a war. Can Robbie's emotions hang on? I think that was the thing because I think technique, I think Robbie's ahead of Nico, but Nico's a younger fighter, maybe slightly stronger and less emotional going into the fight. As soon as Robbie did what he did, and you could see he was sort of jogging around the cage, trying to hold the tears back and everything. The montage I thought was excellent. Whoever came up with that idea, I think deserves a pay rise, because we need to see more of that for fighters who retire or about to retire, because I don't think this is a sport that really appreciates some of the fighters from yesteryear as much as other sports appreciate their athletes from yesteryear. But seeing Robbie Lawler get that adulation, that appreciation, and for him to go out on a victory like that, I always think the best retirements, similar to Amanda Nunes, are the ones where they leave you wanting a little bit more. I want to see Robbie Lawler fight again after that performance, and we're not going to get to see it, but he leaves a legacy behind. Like Chris, you mentioned the Roy McDonald fight. For me, even the Condit fight, like everyone forgets about the Condit fight because it was so close to McDonald fight. That was a war as well. Like
yeah,
Johnny
Hendricks,
how he ended
Johnny
the
Hendricks
fight. He just went into madman mode, and I think that secured him the title. But he leaves an absolute legend, arguably one of the Mount Rushmore for welterweights.
Yeah, mate.
Indeed. Yeah,
definitely.
Great career, and I think they had inductions to the Hall of Fame, I believe, this weekend or earlier in the week, and they had he and his former teammate Jens Pulver, the original lightweight champion.
Did Cerrone get inducted this week as well?
Yes, Cerrone as well, and Jose Aldo. So
Cerrone, one of my favourite fighters, man. I told you before, I had a Sky TV control with its little Cerrone skin on it, mate. And I loved that, man. He was my favourite fighter. He fought on my first ever event I went to versus Jim Miller in Jersey.
Love it.
Yeah, man. What's in Jersey? What's that arena in Jersey again? Atlantic City or something,
Atlantic City, yes. That's the Las Vegas of the East Coast, yes.
That's it, yeah.
I was thinking the cowboy thing that he has. How often do you see people wearing a cowboy hat outside of London at all? Probably not, I'd imagine.
I don't think I've seen anyone wearing a cowboy hat unless they're a tourist.
Yeah.
There we go.
Or an old person going hiking.
Yeah. Makes sense. Unusual. So someone should create a character of the cowboy of London. How about that? It should be one of you two mates. So think about that.
I'm not putting off a cowboy, man.
The next appearance, you don't want to be the cowboy?
Horses scare the life out of me, man.
Yeah,
I'm good.
I'm not an animal person myself.
I was going to say, Callum, that left you out of the two Englishmen. No. But like I said, back here, continuing on my Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour, I am Colin Crandall, the Mad Dog, and these are the two Englishmen, my mates, Callum and Chris, continuing on as we will. Bo Nickel and Valentine Woodburn. We know Valentine was a last-minute replacement for Trayshawn Gore. Trayshawn Gore is a tough guy, would have made it a longer fight, I'm certain, than Valentin Woodburn did. Trayshawn, with that name Gore, his goal was to be the bull, and the bull was going to gore the matador, as per his last name. But then someone gored the bull, with Trayshawn having an injury. Bring in Valentine Woodburn, but alas, he could not make it Valentine's Day, except for his opponent, Bo Nickel. It was Valentine's Day, indeed, courtesy of Mr. Woodburn. And unfortunately, wood was burning after that.
It's like some sort of cryptic message, isn't it?
Yeah.
Got like decode.
So, yes. So, with all respect to Valentine Woodburn, who could beat me in a fight as quickly as Bo Nickel beat him, still it was all Bo Nickel. Woodburn, I think, was a welterweight fighter, and you could see the difference. He did look thick and strong, but much larger and stronger was Bo Nickel. Bo Nickel did come and finish in the first round, but did not have to use any wrestling, and that was actually quite impressive. And, you know, I've been chatting with his father in some Twitter spaces that I put on. Jason Nickel is a really good guy, a Generation X guy like myself, and really comes in with some good insight. He, having been a wrestler through grammar school himself, and then in college, and then continuing on to be a wrestling coach, helping his son, of course, and then his son being coached elsewhere, and Jason continuing coaching great competitors throughout, I believe, the state of Arizona and Texas. In any case, basically, the first fight that Bo Nickel was in the UFC, he did have an adrenaline dump. His father admitted to me he was quite nervous. He felt the pressure to go out there and look dominant, and the spotlight got to him a little bit. He went for this high kick that he missed and ended up on the seat of his pants, and then got his opponent in a neck and arm choke from the top, which wrestlers really like. His jiu-jitsu betrayed him a bit by not getting the right positioning, or by having his opponent be a bit sweaty, and it took all of a minute or so to get to a finish, where normally, had he gotten over to the side of the body and then been able to lock in and put his stomach on the ground, kind of gator walk, or just, could have finished it. So he took criticism in that first fight for looking a bit sloppy, looking quite a bit impatient and nervous, and then not looking brilliant on his jiu-jitsu. I think all that was erased, as there were no flaws in this. He came out a decorated wrestler, and with highly criticized striking ability, and looked brilliant, finishing the fight quickly with the strikes. I think there's nothing more that can be said about that. Than made a great speech about being a proper husband and father, which I know both of you gentlemen can respect a lot, being that yourselves. Yeah. And I think it was all in all a very good night for the Nickel family and Bo. I'm sure you'd agree. Let's go start with Callum. What do you think on that, mate?
Yeah, I thought it was a really good performance. Going into it, you're thinking, right, as a wrestler, one of the most difficult things as a wrestler is fighting someone who's significantly shorter than you, because obviously you're going in for the takedown. You want to be able to control the hips, but if the hips are much lower than yours, it can make it difficult, like we saw with Islam versus Volkanovski, for example. But it's almost like he said to himself, why wrestle when I've got the reach advantage, I've got the size advantage? And even when he walked out, you just could see how much bigger he was naturally than Val. Val always had a puncher's chance. I believe going into the fight was 7-0, high knockout ratio. But you quickly saw the difference in levels. And look, the finishing sequence from Bo was pretty good as well, considering he's not a bona fide striker. I think the criticism he's going to get is because everyone's going to judge him as though he's a veteran or been around for a long time. But in actual fact, what is he, 4-5-0 now? 5-0 now?
Yep.
Like, that's a novice in MMA. The fact that he's doing it at UFC and kind of earning his stripes in the UFC kind of says a lot and pays testament to how good of an athlete he is. But I'm interested to see how they continue to matchmake him and how quickly they potentially push him, because the middleweight division, obviously we're going to speak about it in more detail with one of the other fights, but it's a really short path to getting a title shot at the moment. So it depends how quick they want to push him.
Indeed. Chris Allen, what do you feel about that performance?
Man, No disrespect to Bo Nickal's opponent, man, but he wasn't ready for that, mate. You watched him in there, his movement and stuff, and I mean, it's a big step up going to the UFC, man. Like I said, I experienced it with one of my guys, and it's a massive change. Like the one thing a lot of people notice when they go to the UFC, a lot of the UK guys have told me, is these guys are a lot bigger than the guys on the regional scene because they're cutting a lot more weight, and that's one obstacle to get over already. And if he's already fighting at a weight class he shouldn't be anyway, you know what I mean? Like he's got a huge disadvantage anyway straight away. Like fair enough, there was no wrestling used, so the stand-up game doesn't matter too much with the weight. If it's just a little bit here and there. But I watched it and I felt if I was the promoter, Dana White, watching that, I'd be a little bit embarrassed about that fight. To be fair, because I feel like you just chucked some guy in there who was not prepared. And yeah, fine, he's capable, but he was not prepared at all against the guy who's been training hard, had a fight in the UFC already. You know what I mean? And everyone's saying he didn't use his wrestling. Well, he doesn't need to. You know what I mean? It was an easy fight for him, and I don't think that actually proves anything more for Bo Nickel in my eyes.
Right,
Like
right.
but not as no disrespect to him at all, but he got to show some of his stand up actually, which I will say about. He did get to show some of his stand up, which he's been doing, where he was going in, he stepped back out again and stepped back in and finished it, which was fantastic foot movement. But it's hard to say because he's only 5-0 or 4-0 at the time. How can you chuck him in against someone who's 30-0 or 20-10 or 20-2 or something like that? It's obviously it's the wrestling background, isn't it, which got him to where he was. It's hard, mate, because I think they're all amazing fighters, but it's just sometimes fights should have just been left alone and rescheduled for another time, in my eyes.
Yeah. Because I think you mates could have done almost as well as Valentine.
I doubt it.
No, I wouldn't even got in there.
How could it have been worse, though? It couldn't have gone worse.
Mate, when that referee said, "Let's go," I would have just tapped out on the floor like,
"Yeah," and jumped over the cage.
I'll take my 50 grand, Dana. See you later.
I'd have to walk in with a cane, so that wasn't very good either. But nevertheless, I think what we can say to sum this up in terms of American money, sometimes we wish that Valentine's Day cost for our wives will only cost a nickel, and indeed, in this case, it did. As Bo Nickel defeats Valentine Woodburn and ruins his Valentine's Day in July, unfortunately. Nevertheless, continuing on, we have Dan Hooker against Jalen Turner. Didn't you mates have a funny feeling that the New Zealander might pull something in this fight? I did.
I did. 100%.
Yeah, I didn't go so. No, well, I tell you what, and you did, you didn't, and I was on the fence. I felt like all signs and recent activity and the skill level and the younger man, the better athlete, the taller man, I did feel everything pointed to Jalen winning, but something was gnawing at me all week saying, man, and then the blonde hair, I thought that was going to bring Hooker luck. I had a funny feeling, and I advocated people not to bet on that fight, because I had a weird feeling that Hooker could maybe do something, but I wasn't sure. And in all honesty, I think the bettors are kind of torn as to who really deserved the decision there. I am finding about 60% perhaps felt that Hooker rightfully deserved the decision, but 40% felt that Turner, one of the major old websites that always has all three of their columnists judge and score each fight and publishes it, had 2 out of 3 of those judges scoring for Jalen Turner. Sadly enough, this makes 2 fights in a row that Jalen Turner barely lost by a split decision. And it's quite unfortunate because had he won both of those fights, he would be in a really great position right now. He'd be in the top 10. They'd be talking about who the next big name guy is for Jalen, and everything would have gone well. However, I will say this: the caveat to this is that him missing weight was not good. Form, as you guys would say in England, not proper form or anything. And unfortunately,
just not cricket.
Not cricket, mate. That's it. Yeah,
just not cricket.
Just not cricket. Yeah, it's a bit cheeky. I would say that he were to lose the coming because he already had all the advantages, or as you Mason say, advantages. Going into that fight, and then he misses weight. So perhaps that, but then no one does it on purpose. But nevertheless, I do feel a bit bad for Jalen because he was was a big fight for him, and I thought he beat Gamrot. I was leaning a little bit toward him earning the decision here as well, and the judges felt against him in both cases. So quite unfortunate. Also for a lot of gamblers, because a lot of gamblers rightfully picked him, and then they're not were not paid. Nevertheless, great performance. Dan Hooker saved his career. He really pretty much saved his career. He'll probably be a blonde going forward. Perhaps one day we should all come in here as blondes. I don't know who would look the best. As a Callum, I think you might look the best as a blonde.
I'm willing to give it a go.
I love it. I love it. One of these days we'll do it. That'll be when we get our fish and chips sponsors. Have a bit of money coming in so that if we don't like how it looks, we can change back right away.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, that was my takeaway. This will go around. This go around, we'll alternate. We'll start with the England's most respected promoter, Chris Allen. What's your takeaway on this great matchup here between the New Zealander, the Hangman Dan Hooker, and the Tarantula Jalen Turner from the United States?
I hate saying it, Colin, because we agree on everything, man. But this one, I don't agree with what you're saying, man, at all. I don't agree with it. Well, not with everything, but
That's
so
okay.
first of all, I think Dan Hooker won that fight. In my eyes, I thought he won round 2 and 3. I personally did. Like, he did some serious. Jalen was absolutely shattered, mate, after that first round, mate. And Dan Hooker just put it on him, mate. Yeah, for 2 rounds. He definitely won the third. He definitely won the second. I saw when it was a split decision, even Dan Hooker was like, what are you on about? I just beat this guy up for 2 rounds, you know?
I could see that, though. I could see that.
Yeah, like damage-wise and pressure, and yeah, if Jalen was landing shots, Dan Hooker was beating him up. He was turtling him up and everything, man. It was just like, and the reason I backed him in my bet for this one, Hooker, is because I look at when I do matchmaking myself, I look at like who's fought who and what level of opponent. Because some guy could be 6-0, right? Okay, and they fought average opponents, yeah.
Yes.
So I looked at who Jalen had fought, and he's fought some tough opposition. Don't get me wrong, yeah. But what Dan Hooker has faced compared to what he's faced, right, is a whole different level, mate. Yeah, a whole different level. And I knew full well if Hooker survived that first round, his experience and knowledge of the game, and his absolute the wars he's been in, that was nothing for him, man. Do you know what I mean? That was like, I'm going to come and just beat you up now for 2 rounds. You know, and that head kick he took in that fight, mate, of Jalen Turner. Sounded like a baseball bat hit him in the face. He just laughed at him pretty much. Just came forward. And I knew Dan Hooker would win that, mate. When I saw him as an underdog, that was the first of my accumulator, or parlay, as you would say in America.
Yes,
yeah, man. I mean, it's a bloody French word, but anyway.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, yeah. Fair play to you on that. Continue, Chris. Go ahead.
But, yeah, man, I knew Hooker would win that fight. Definitely. When I put my money straight on that one. Easy money, man. That was, I thought. Hey, I was worried in the first round for a little bit, you know, but when he got through that first round, I thought he's just going to go and put it on him because he was so exhausted. He landed great shots. I thought the second round personally could have been close to a 10-8 because there was a fight finishing situation from Dan Hooker.
Yeah,
you know, so that's why it was the second round or the third round. I can't remember. He actually dropped him to the floor and he curled up, didn't he? You know, and in my eyes, you know, I mean, that's like,
you know, come to think of it, I was distracted during that fight, so I should probably rewatch it. My opinion.
Oh yes, here we go.
Yeah. You know, I was, but nevertheless, Callum, what was your takeaway of that fight, mate?
I'll be honest. For the first, that was one of the fights where I watched and I was just like, I think Hooker wins, but I don't even care who gets the nod here. I just want to see it again. That fight was amazing. I think you're right though, Chris. Rounds 1 and round 3 were the 2 easiest rounds to score. I thought round 2 was more difficult to score than it seemed, because if I'm not mistaken, Jalen could have stopped him earlier on in the round, but then Hooker ended the round literally on fire and looked like he was just going to batter him. And Jalen looks like he didn't even look like he wanted to come out for the third round at one stage. I was thinking
fight finishing situation. That's the new rule, isn't it?
Yeah, very true. But that fight was brilliant. I did think going in, I thought Jalen Turner would win, but when I saw he missed weight, it made me think that's not a good sign. Because if I'm not mistaken, he's not missed weight before, so for him to miss weight now, it might not be a good sign. And Dan Hooker hasn't had the best of results recently, but that fight, it's almost like he just said to himself, "This is do or die for me." His chin looked better. I mean, a few fights ago, he's been knocked down and knocked out and roughed up. That wasn't happening. Jalen Turner hits hard, as we've seen in his previous fights, but he just had a no quit attitude in this fight and a no die attitude, and it was an amazing fight. An amazing fight. I'd love to see them two fight again. I'm very intrigued to see where Hooker goes next because, as we've all said, he's been at that top end of the lightweight division, and he took a couple of losses. Imagine he fought Poirier and it was a 1-round fight. If he wins that fight, how different could his career have been? But he didn't, obviously, and Poirier did. But look, he's brilliant. Both of them are brilliant. I think Jalen's got a bright future, and Hooker's shown that he's still a guy who is not to be messed about with.
Absolutely. The Kiwi power, I think, or isn't he a Kiwi or something like that? One of them, something. But yes, New Zealand, the win, and Australia kind of may have embraced that as a win somewhat because otherwise they went 1-4. You know what was interesting to me, gentlemen, was that going into that fight, I think you had several Mexican fighters on the card and several Australian fighters on the card. No one thought that nearly all of them would lose, and I certainly didn't. And it turns out nearly all of them lost. One Mexican fighter won during the entire night, and one Australian fighter won during the entire night, as long as you don't consider Dan Hooker Australian. If you do, then then it was 2 for the continent. But yeah, brilliant way to save your career. Sometimes when your back is against the wall, you do manage to take it extremely seriously, come out well, and now Dan Hooker will probably be a blonde for the rest of his life after that.
Did you see that picture Dan Hooker put on Instagram with his broken wrist? He broke it in the second round, I think he said it was.
How did he break it? Was it blocking a kick or something?
God knows, man. I heard Dana White say it in the post press conference, and then I saw him post the picture up online, and it was like literally like split in two, man. It's disgusting. And apparently he said to the referee, if I win, when you raise my hand, do it carefully because I've got a sore hand. You know what I mean?
I saw when he did that, but obviously you're not thinking he's got a broken wrist.
Yeah, man, I have to go back and check. They said in the press conference, I thought it was round 2. I don't know, because Moreno broke something as well in the fight, and that might have been round 2 or it was round 1 or round 2.
Yeah, I think so as well. Yeah. But well done by the New Zealander.
It's definitely broken.
Absolutely, a lot of blood in the blonde hair too. He had a lot of blood in that blonde hair. Who was that reminiscent of with blood in the?
Yeah, that just makes it look worse, doesn't it? The blonde hair.
It reminds me of, I know it's a different sport, but Ric Flair. It just reminds me of Ric Flair.
Yes. I think that's what they were saying. Someone wrote that. Yep, indeed, the great American wrestler. So that was absolutely a great fight. Both men will be back. I'd love to see them replay it. They probably won't do that because when one wins, he moves on upward, and the other man moves on somewhere else. But we'll have to see what happens. But there's talk, though, that Jalen Turner will need to be going to a weight class higher due to that weight miss. And I think it makes sense. Jalen is in his late 20s right now, or perhaps 30 years old. Let me take a quick look at it, and then that's when you do start getting a bit thicker and heavier naturally. He's 28 years old. So, yeah, it can also happen at 28. And at 6'3", he probably should be more than just 10 stone 5 or whatever you guys would say. Right?
What would they fight at again?
155, and he was 158 in this case.
Jesus, mate, it's like 70 kgs, man. 155.
I'm
6'4", and I weigh over 100. I weigh 112, 113 kgs, man.
Yeah, he's only.
Imagine cutting down to that. Oh, man.
You look like a skeleton. You would look like Skeletor, from whatever that old series was. But yeah, very thin. Maybe we'll see Jalen at 170. I think he'd be effective there as well. But we may find out soon. Nevertheless, we have the co main event with Dricus du Plessis, everyone's favorite white African fighter. Not everyone's, but some's right. Against Robert Whittaker, the Aussie. One thing I noticed at the weigh-in was even though Dricus may have only been a slight bit taller, he did look a lot more muscular than Robert Whittaker at the weigh-ins. He looked like he was carrying 10 more pounds or 3/4 of a stone, 5 kilograms or whatever. He looked a good bit bigger. And but I will still say this, and I'm curious to hear both of your opinions. But I will say that I felt Whitaker looked a bit off for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it was Duplessis. I hate to take anything away from Dricus Duplessis. I will tell you what my feeling on that fight was. I felt similar to how I felt on the Turner and Hooker fight. I felt that on paper, everything says Whitaker. But I was not a doubter or a hater of the South African. I was always very impressed by him because he just seemed to have that will to win, seemed to be a strong, rugged guy with a good chin, cutting a lot of weight, a big guy for the division, and fighting hard for his country. Very few South Africans competing in the UFC. So I was not anything but high on Duplessis, but I just thought there's levels to this game, and he was jumping up a level, but I didn't have tremendous doubt in him at all. Nevertheless, I did think Whitaker would just be a bit too much, and he was not. Duplessis just comes in and puts that pressure on you. He seems to have no fear at all. His chin is completely solid. He's right there in the beginning of his prime, I think 29 years old. Yep, just barely into his prime. 20-2, and he's on now he's on a 9-fight win streak. He's on an 8-fight win streak now, and last time he lost was 5 years ago, and then last time he lost before that was 4 years before that. Really, really good fighter. Credit to him. Great tough guy. Man looks huge. Shoulders popping out in a crazy way that you don't see too many guys' shoulders popping out when they're clean. But I think he seems like a clean athlete. He's just a genetic.
Yeah, he seems like it.
Massive, isn't he?
Yeah, just a big, massive genetic, very genetically blessed and gifted athlete, and looked great. But I did feel Rob somehow was a bit off. I'd be anxious to hear your thoughts. Callum, start with you. What did you think about the whole thing? And did it appear Rob was off to you, or should all credit be given to Duplessis?
I'll be honest, I think you got to give credit to Duplessis. Going into the fight, this was the only fight on the card where I was like, I know who's going to win this. It's just a matter of how he wins. But boy, was I wrong, because literally when they both got in the cage and they were sort of circling as the fight started, I was just like, Duplessis just looks like he should be in a different weight division. Like, I rarely look at Rob in a fight and think he looks undersized, but he looked tiny in there.
Yeah.
And then I saw the reach advantage that but again, we've seen Robert like negate that in other fighters as well. So you're thinking, all right. But the moment the fight started really going, and then you just saw that he was walking him down, and when Robert was throwing punches, it didn't seem to really affect him. And I was just like, this isn't a good recipe. The fact that it's a 3-round fight means Rob could potentially escape with a win here, because obviously the longer the fight goes, the more chance of getting caught. But the moment Duplessis caught him, Rob just seemed like he had no answers for it, and he just seemed stunned. And it was weird to see that, because he's almost been to the middleweight division what Max Holloway's been to the featherweight division. He's the final boss before you get to the title shot. But look, everyone going into this was like, Duplessis should have just hung around and waited for the title shot, and myself included. I thought it's crazy matchmaking and silly. I was so wrong, because this fight now is massive. They're the only two in the division to beat Robert Whitaker. They both hate each other. He's earned being number one contender. No one can ever take that away from him now. Before, you could have said, oh, he's got this fight based on is he disliking him? No, he's earned it now. No one can take that away from him. He's beat the second best in the division, which makes you the second best in the division. I'm all up for this fight now. I'm very intrigued. I'm intrigued to see what happens with Robert Whitaker going forward as well.
Yeah, indeed. There's talk about maybe him dropping to 170, where he fought for several years.
Oh, I think that's a terrible idea. Apparently, he said not too long ago, he said there's no way he'd go back down.
He's just, but as small as he appeared, it would seem that could be advisable if he could make that. But if it would be a struggle, I would agree it would be not a good thing. But then again,
I think Duplessis is just that much bigger. I think he's just that big. He can make anyone look small.
Yeah. What was your takeaway, Chris?
Well, it was one of them ones where I wanted, in my heart, I wanted Whitaker to win, but with my betting, my accumulator, my parlay, I needed Duplessis to win, you know? And my dad lives in South Africa, man. You know, he's got a South African wife and stuff like that, and so I've technically got some sort of family down there as well. And they used to be, you know, I mean, they're pretty much they still are. No, they're not an English colony anymore. But anyway, they used to be part of our Commonwealth. I'm pretty sure. So like they drive the same side of the road as us, not like you guys over there. You know, the steering wheel's on the right hand side.
The wrong side of the road. Right?
Yes, exactly. So as much as I love Whitaker, I really wanted him du Plessis to win, because also what a perfect way for the UFC for that all to happen. Because if Whitaker wins, it's just another, what do you do? Do you know what I mean? But for the UFC, they didn't want to see him lose. But if he did lose, then it's an easy work for them going forward. You know, and Whitaker will stay in that division, man. People have to try and get past him still. He'll still be that person. He won't be a gatekeeper. He'll still be that person. Like, you've got to get past me. And he's stopped enough people as he's fought Adesanya enough times. So du Plessis got through this time, you know, and I think if Whitaker fights du Plessis again, that doesn't happen again in my eyes. But fair play to du Plessis, man. He looked phenomenal, didn't he? Everyone counted him out. Because when we first saw him, he was a bit sluggish and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? But he's sharp now, man. He's big and sharp. You don't have to cut any weight to get any quicker. You know, and he caught Whitaker, mate. He caught him well, and he fought fantastically, and he deserves that win. You can't take that away from him. Fighting Izzy is a different story.
Yeah.
You know, Izzy's a stand-up fighter. Okay, he's a kickboxer. Yeah, he knocked out I know he got knocked out, but he knocked out Pereira. You know, Pereira's fought some of the best K1 fighters in the world. So, but then do we see a different side, different game plan? It's an interesting one, but I think what's the best thing is that it's something different. It's a different challenge for Adesanya, and you never know on that one. He'll be a huge underdog, Lisa. He'll be a huge underdog on that. People won't, because he's not a big enough name. People think, well, it's just someone they're chucking at him, like the Anderson Silva days, where it was just, you know what I mean? Anyone can fight him, you know. So yeah, mate, I can't wait to see that fight happen. I was a bit disappointed with the way Izzy came in the cage, and I know du Plessis sort of started it a bit, didn't he? Because he says, "Oh, the great Adesanya's like, I wouldn't know about great." You know what I mean? And he's probably getting in his face and like giving him all this, like, "I'm African, well, if you're African, blah blah blah," and like he says, "Oh, how about we go to New Zealand and see what they say?" And I thought, "Oh my God, do you know what I mean?"
Yeah.
And Adesanya didn't quite know what to say to that, but
no.
But he is Nigerian, isn't he, Adesanya?
Yeah.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, just because he's in New Zealand, he knows where his roots are. So I think it's interesting, people, that because he's from South Africa, everyone's thinking a white African, you know, like you said, you know. Man. But I think that's a great fight for Africa in general, with the whole UFC wanting to go over. Obviously, South Africa's got EFC in it, whatever it is, the organisation, which is quite their biggest MMA organisation down there. Quite a few British fighters been down there. So MMA is well known down there, and it's big. So I think for Africa as a whole, especially with the performance centre they're looking at building there, or they have built, or they're building, do you know what I mean? And wanting to go to Africa soon, what a great place to have UFC Africa. You know what I mean? The main headline, Adesanya versus du Plessis. I'm saying it now. That's it.
Yeah. So. It would be brilliant.
Sorry, Colin. I was going to say, you know, the reason why they dislike each other, I actually think it came about through accident. I don't think du Plessis meant malice in when he said what he first said.
I agree.
The problem is Izzy took it a certain way, and instead of du Plessis kind of going back and going, do you know what? I understand why I took it that way. I didn't mean it that way. I think du Plessis kind of doubled down, and then Izzy thought, "Oh, if you're doubling down, I'm going to double down," and it's ego on top of ego on top of ego.
Yeah.
And I think that's where they got to. But I do think it's going to be an amazing fight. I do actually think I mean, we've not seen Adesanya in a real blood feud since Costa.
Yes.
And I think du Plessis is going to do way better than Costa did.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think du Plessis will do as well as people thought Costa was going to do.
Yeah,
but didn't. But yeah, I think that what du Plessis, not to go too far into it, but what du Plessis put out there, I think, was saying, if you consider a fighter who was born, raised his whole life, and I think still resides in Africa, he would be the first to have won a title of the UFC. And then, because I think he mentioned you had Francis Ngannou, who spent many years in Cameroon, but many years in France. You had Kamaru Usman, who spent few years in Nigeria and many years in the United States. And then you had Izzy, who spent few years in Nigeria and many years in New Zealand and the United States. And so, like Callum was saying, I think that's what Du Plessis was saying, is that both of these men had spent many years outside of Africa where he had not. And I think that's what his point, but then he didn't clarify it, and then it went all downhill.
Here's someone who, and this sounds crazy when depending on how you phrase things. Leon Edwards pretty much said the exact same thing after he won the belt in relation to Michael Bisping, saying, look, Michael Bisping was the first guy to win a belt, but I'm the first guy who's done it, but still lives in the UK. I said I can do it. There was no uproar. There was no like beef with him and Michael Bisping.
No.
It was just the way it was articulated, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only difference is the way it was articulated.
Right, exactly. And then also Izzy knows how to promote a fight. He's a
exactly
guy.
UFC are counting those pay-per-views already, man. They're thinking, lovely. So we got Whitaker lost, which works perfectly. Oh, look, and Izzy's going to come in and kick off as well, even better. Lovely.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I don't think, and if whoever wants to say it's staged, it's not. Izzy's not like that. He came in, I reckon he was going to come in and shake his hand at first. But then it's, as you said one little thing, and he's like, here we go. But hey, UFC are laughing now.
Yeah, he had a couple of drinks as well, he admitted, but then 2 drinks for a man who weighs 200 pounds is not usually that much. But, I hope people take it in the vein of fun and competition, because certainly we don't need to make MMA about any sort of racial tension. I think that's quite unfortunate, and I hope people don't read that out of that. And I would hope that after they win, whoever wins, they both have mutual respect, because, it's an interesting thought. But I think certainly I don't think Izzy has ever professed himself to be a racist. I don't think Du Plessis has ever indicated that he's a racist. And so
that's what I love about MMA.
Yeah.
I love in other sports, you get it loads of football and stuff, mate. Bad. You know what I mean, man? But MMA, it's all about discipline, respect, and
it is.
If you're going to be racist, that guy's going to knock you out, man.
Yeah, exactly.
He'll just fight you then. So I'll tell you what, then we'll have a fight about it and we'll deal with it that way, shall we?
Exactly.
We'll see who's the bigger man then.
Exactly. And it will be a great fight. Izzy is such a great sharpshooter. He's so great at managing distance. He's so dangerous, discouraging guys from coming in.
Du Plessis is heavy, man. He's big.
And Du Plessis loves to be the bull in the china shop rushing in. And so it's going to be very interesting, because they're both going to want to have the fight go on their terms. And the other one is they're both going to be putting pressure on to achieve that. So I can't wait for that fight. It's going to be great wherever it's held. So look forward to it. Okay, then we go on to the co-main event where we had Brandon Moreno and Mr. Pantoja. Alexandre, as they say, Alexandre Pantoja. I will tell you this. That one, first of all, I felt Moreno won. It was very close. What I posted was this. I posted that I felt Moreno won, but I could see it a draw. I felt Moreno won by 1 point, or 1 round, 3-2. I could also see a draw, and I could also see Pantoja winning 3 rounds to 2. Nevertheless, I did feel that Moreno won 3 rounds to 2, and I 2 things. First of all, going into it, just because Pantoja had beaten Moreno when he was 23 and 24 years old, I felt would have no bearing on the fight when Moreno's at 29, in his prime, at full strength, the best he's ever been. Inarguably, he's better than he was at 23 and 24 years old, with no question. And so, in all honesty, I felt that he would really take care of Pantoja handily. When Pantoja beat him, Moreno was 23 and 24, and Pantoja was 28 and 29, just in his prime, in all fairness to Moreno. Now we have Moreno in his prime, and Pantoja's 33 or 34 years old. So, in all honesty, I felt that Moreno would win quite convincingly. He did not do that. That is the truth. However, I felt that the damage, clearly, much more damage, was done by Pantoja. By Moreno. He was busting up Pantoja's face. Pantoja looked like he was about ready to get out of there on a few occasions. If Moreno would have poured it on, he just looked like he was taking a beating. He did get better grappling position. He did indeed, but was never really threatening with it. He never really achieved a lot on the ground. So, the thing that I felt when it came time for the decision was that the judges are going to do it again. I could feel it. I literally could feel it. And I put out a post that said, sometimes I feel like the judges are deliberately scoring for the man that they know lost, because it's getting to be preposterous, in my opinion. Some of the shit we see now, this one was close. I'm not saying this one was out that outrageous, but it's starting to not surprise me. It's starting to seem as if the judges are saying, we're not being paid much here. We're getting enough money to buy 2 fish and chips meals and whatever, so fuck these guys. We're just going to goof around and, throw a wrench into the works and deliberately pick the wrong guy and make him the winner. That's what I felt. And I said to myself, please don't do it. It's not right. The champ fought hard, defended the title. You can't beat the champ. In boxing, they've always said you can't beat the champ that way. You don't get the title by beating him perhaps by a whisker. You don't. The champ retains his title. Now, whether that's right or not, you can argue. But I could feel it coming. I could feel it coming. And when they announced split decision Pantoja, I'm like, perfect. I don't know why we should ever again expect the judges to pick the person that won, because now it's basically a shit show, in my opinion. Nevertheless, Pantoja did fight better than I thought. He did get positioning on the ground. The better wrestler was Moreno, but for whatever reason, Moreno seemed like he hadn't even been training his wrestling. He's training over at Fortis MMA, which is a good school, not a great school, in all honesty. It's a good team. The bottom line is, I think Moreno underperformed a bit. Got cut up a little bit early. Maybe that. Well, then also he did hurt something quite badly. I forget what it was, but it was something that he injured early, and I think that may have had a lot to do with this. But it was a very close fight. I think if Moreno hadn't got hurt early, he would have performed a lot better. I think he's the younger man, the better fighter, the more balanced fighter. But it looked like he gave up on his wrestling completely. I think perhaps maybe he hurt something in his leg or something. I don't know, but. He underperformed. It shouldn't have been that difficult, and I still felt he won, although it was very close. And that's that. But respect to Pantoja. You see the great footage of Gilbert Burns being so ecstatic, crying, for joy, and Charles Oliveira both saying "Boa," I think, which is congratulations, a great work, something like that. I forget, didn't like that decision. Brilliant fight, but I think that the grappling and control time amounted to nothing, in my opinion, and it seems like the judges cannot find that middle ground. They can't find the ability to give credit for really effective grappling and effective ground and pound and near submissions and control time that's amounting to something. They can't give that credit. Either they're giving no credit to that effective grappling, or they're giving a lot of credit to ineffective grappling. They can't. I guess this is one better than it used to be, which was judges never giving any credit for any grappling. At least now they're doing it, but they're still doing it wrong. That was a Brandon Moreno title defense win by a whisker, and it was stolen from him. My thoughts. Whoever's next, Chris, I think you may be next this time. What do you think?
Yeah, man. I was surprised it was a split decision, to be fair, man. I thought, because I know how the judges are like, man, I was like, yeah, this is easily a win. I actually gave, if the way the judges score it, man, I was like, nearly gave 4 rounds to Pantoja, to be fair. You know what I mean? But definitely 3 for sure. When a judge gave 49-46 for Moreno, I was quite surprised.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah. But yeah, man, it was unfortunate. Not unfortunate for my bank account though, because I have Pantoja on my accumulator as well.
We got to call you the accumulator king.
If you just look into it, you can see these things. And Moreno's always been in. I know with Figueiredo, he beat him quickly one fight, but generally it's just 5-round wars, sort of things, And I think Pantoja at some point would actually finish him at some point. He got his back quite a few times, but Moreno very well, he reversed lovely and things like that. But it's ground control, man. They count that stuff, man. Hanging off your back against the cage and octagon control. That's what bloody flies, mate. Octagon control and all that stuff. And he intelligently won that fight. You know what I mean?
Well,
He fought to win the decision in that fight in the end. And it was unfortunate. Moreno probably get another shot at it, maybe not straight away, but potentially could do. But I think it'd be that Brandon Roy. What's his name? Royale. I can never say his name properly. Royval.
Yeah.
That'd be a good fight, even if it's
Yeah.
versus Moreno. But yeah, mate, I did think he won. I thought Pantoja won. I bet before the fight thinking he'd won. I learnt my lesson after betting with Adesanya when he fought Pereira. You know, thinking, oh yeah, he had all these losses before. He's going to beat him now in MMA. So I thought, no, I'm not falling for that one again. So I bet on Pantoja, you know, and it came through, mate. And I honestly thought he won the fight. I really do. And I think it's unfortunate Moreno got injured early on. I think that was the biggest downfall because it was close. And if it's that close, then being uninjured would make a big difference in my eyes. So.
Yeah, I agree. Well said. And as David Bowie said, ground control to Major Tom, if you remember that. And so on that note, Major Callum, what was your takeaway on this fight? Other than not takeaway is food over there. So, but the other takeaway, what's your takeaway not involving food on this one?
I had Pantoja win 3-2. I thought the 5th round is where he won it. I think going into the 5th round, I thought it's 2-2. And I think the 5th round went to Pantoja. So I had it Pantoja. Again, if I'm Hooker and Jalen Turner, I'm sitting there thinking, yep, nothing's topping our fight. Brilliant fight. And then they go watch the co-main event and you just think, well, they've just got fight of the night now. Like that, again, from the start to finish of that fight, again, incredible. I'd arguably say that might be better than Moreno Figueiredo 1. I rate that I like yesterday's fight. I thought was amazing.
Really good.
I didn't know about Moreno's injury until you guys just said it. So I do want to see that fight run back again now without hopefully any of them getting injured. It just seemed Pantoja just didn't really respect Moreno's power. I think flurries and combinations and technique, Moreno all day. But unless you can get someone's respect with your power, the bigger man nearly always walks you down and ends up getting you. And I think that happened a couple of times in this fight. I think if Moreno maybe had a little bit more power, I think he could have potentially stopped Pantoja because he was piecing him up at stages.
Yes.
But it's like you'd jab Pantoja, his head would flick back, but he'd keep on walking forward. And I think that's probably what made it more difficult for Moreno. But Moreno, they both got a chin on them. They both got, like, after the 2nd round, I thought Pantoja's gas tank was done. I was like, he's done. And then in the 5th round, he's still going strong. I'm like, these guys are warriors. I hope we see the fight again. I really do. Because I don't think there's anyone else in the division, maybe barring Kai Kara France, who can really test those two.
Yeah, I think very well said. I think Brandon Royval, but I think they deserve.
I don't think he gets close to Pantoja.
It was funny how the commentators were saying that Pantoja can't just keep walking into those punches. He can't just keep taking them. And I was thinking it's the 3rd round now and he's taking them. So let's move on. You know what I mean?
Yes,
so
indeed.
You can't keep landing those jabs. You can't keep taking that damage. But he knew that was the way to win. And you know what? He probably felt Moreno's hardest punch. Thought, yeah, I can take a few of them. Yeah. Classic style. Take one to give one, man. So I love
without a doubt. Well, if Moreno loses and wins again, he will be a rare UFC fighter to have lost his title, I think, on 3 occasions and reclaimed it. So, that will be an interesting statistic right there, maybe even the first. I had one person on Twitter send me a comment saying, I don't think Moreno really wanted to win. That's the problem with him. He doesn't really want to. He likes to win the championship, but he doesn't like to be the champion. So it's kind of, which is quite odd, right?
Yeah, very
odd.
Strange people out there, man.
Well, I'm sure it's not the case. It would be very odd if it was the case. But I will say this: that obviously holding on to your title consistently for many years is what the goal is. But there would be something to be said for being the person that can reclaim your title the most times. I think it may be not exactly the greatest distinction, nowhere near as great as continuously holding it, but I do think it's not necessarily a negative distinction to be a fighter that would be reclaiming the title more times than anyone else. I don't think so. Perhaps I'm wrong. Just my opinion. You guys can think on that if you want, or if you have a thought with me.
I don't think that's the case. I reckon Moreno definitely, like, if you're gonna lose your belt, you go out a lot easier than that. Like,
that's true.
Yeah,
You know, yeah.
exactly.
You'd
He
have
didn't need to
let
sit
him
through
take
that.
your back in the second round or whatever round it was, and let him choke you out. Like,
Yeah. I don't.
Retired after having a broken ankle, I think it was. So,
Yeah.
no, a broken ankle he's got.
I think for some reason
I think that
I
might have been
can't
it.
I can't get out this. Someone can Google it. Google it
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah, let's have a look.
Yeah, and that's not just wrestling. That's what I was. But nevertheless, no. What I was pointing out, not the question of whether he didn't like to be the champion, but the question of if he does become the record holder for having reclaimed his title, is that necessarily a negative distinction? I don't think so. I think when all is said and done, at the end of your career, if you're the fighter that has reclaimed the championships more than any other fighter, I think that's at least somewhat of a positive.
Something. It's like they say you're a four-time like heavyweight champion. Well, that means you've lost it 4 times as well.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Because, but hey, if you can beat the champion, you need to stay the champion in my eyes. You know what I mean? You need to defend that belt. But I know what you mean, though. It's still a good thing to say. Like I beat multiple champions. You know, so you can't take that away from no one.
No, I agree. Callum, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. Apparently, it was a broken hand he suffered in the first round.
Okay, so that shouldn't have affected his wrestling. It seems like he gave up on his wrestling.
I wouldn't know which hand he broke because he was throwing both hands.
Yeah, hard.
Bloody, yeah. I just can't even think of, like, if I broke my finger back in the day, I wouldn't even look at throwing a punch with a broken finger.
Oh yeah, the pain. Yeah, I had dislocated my thumb in a fight about 25 years ago. You know, and so he was crazy. Yeah, you don't really want to keep throwing it.
Yes. Oh man, the willpower and the mentality to do that.
Indeed, and excuse the allergies, everyone. This is one of the worst allergy shows for me. I apologize. It's just beginning.
I'm in that same boat. Believe me.
Yeah, I tell you what. But anyway, nevertheless, we'll get on to the main event of the evening. We are live for it's time for that one. So this was a fight that I did get a good read on, and in fact, I posted in the last minute, throwing a 3-unit bet up on Volkanovski. And here's what I felt. And I spoke about this with you guys last week, and I also spoke about it on a Twitter Spaces I did. I said, wouldn't it be interesting if Volkanovski agreed not to wrestle in this fight? And I said, because if he agreed not to wrestle in this fight, it would be a banger, and it would give Yair a very good chance of winning the title, taking it from him. But I said, I do feel like he's certainly not going to agree to do that. And I do think that he is certainly going to wrestle. And I do feel like that's going to be a problem for Yair. And this is what I looked at there. We looked at the fight from 5-6 years ago against Frankie Edgar, which was terrible for Yair. He kept being taken down and controlled and smashed by a Frankie Edgar who was near the end of his career. However, that was a much younger Yair. So we fast forward to earlier this year, where he did face Josh Emmett, who at that point was also older and had bad knees and had numerous surgeries. And even though he did end up winning that fight, he did get controlled in that first round. So that was a red flag to me, because if he got controlled and taken down in the first round by Josh Emmett, what do you think Volk is going to do to him? And so I basically thought to myself also that Volkanovski handling and beating, in my opinion, Islam Makhachev, even though they didn't give him the victory, I really felt Yair was in trouble in this fight. I wasn't certain enough to have said, let's bet 10 units or anything like that, but normally betting 1 to 2 units, 3 units, so I was a fair bit more confident than usual. And I just, from the get-go, Yair was looking good with his kicks, but Volk looked like it was nothing. Volk is such a tank in there. You guys know he played rugby at 100 kilos or whatever it was there.
It's
right?
basically a heavyweight, yeah.
Yeah, and now he's at 145. I think he cuts down a lot of weight. He's not a tall guy, but he's a thick, strong guy. Probably all that rugby for all those years, and he looks like a very solid individual. in the cage. Like he really looks like a guy that is going to be quite difficult to hurt, and I think that's possibly why he did so well against Makachev, is having even extra weight and extra fluid in his brain, extra hydrated. I think, if you ask Makachev, he's like a tank. He's like, and I think Makachev found out that this may be a shorter guy, but he's not a small guy by any means, and he's a very, very strong, hard, tough guy. Again, perhaps from all that rugby. And so I just felt like it was going to be quite difficult, especially with the wrestling. And I think the more balanced fighter won this fight and made it look fairly easy. And man, Volkanovski is just a killer. He talked to, he had Topuria kind of jump over the guardrail there and speak with him a bit. And Topuria is a brilliant fighter, but if Topuria wants some of that, good luck is what I say, because I'm betting against you for sure. If we're talking about Topuria doesn't know who this guy is. He said, "Oh, you're a short guy," even though he's this much taller than.
Yeah.
Well, you're a short guy, and then Volk just said, "So are you. Nice to meet you, short guy." But if that should be a brilliant fight, though. I'd be very excited to see it, but. Volkanovski is a machine, and that was a brilliant performance, and I felt quite justified with having picked him and believing in him. Respect to Yair, but it looked just kind of like Volkanovski decided enough fooling around with this striking. You know what I mean? Enough fooling around. Let's get down to business. And went in there and, as we used to say in Generation X, went in there and just beat the fuck out of Yair Rodriguez, So that was my take. Callum, your thoughts?
Volk just doing what Volk does, like showing why he's the best in the world. Yair is a very dangerous fighter, and he made him look average. And again, I'm a massive Holloway fan. Holloway is my favorite featherweight. But look at the war Yair had with Max, and look at what just happened to Yair. It was night and day. And I know MMA maths is different and styles make fights. I get all of that. But Volk outstruck him on the feet, out wrestled him, and got the finish. You cannot have many more complete performances than that. And even the fight finishing sequence, and this is what makes him so good, because he's so cerebral. He was speaking about the fighting in sequence. He was like, yeah, I could have stayed there and just beat him up against the cage, but how many times did we see Yair in trouble and then come back with something crazy that hurts his opponent? So he's like, why stand here? I'm going to hit him to the body. I'm going to put him down. And once he's on the ground, then he can't do anything. And he just did it. And to be able to think in the middle of a storm, I think that's what separates Volk from the rest of some of these fighters, because no matter how bad a situation gets, he's able to just think his way through and navigate through. You've seen him in situations where Max gets the head kick knocked down, but he's still fine. You see him when he's in a triangle against Ortega, who's known to be a triangle specialist. He gets through it and then beats Ortega to within an inch of his life, and then he goes and does that to Yair. You just got to give the man his flowers. In my opinion, no one 145 pounds and under is beating him. It just isn't happening. And I'll be honest, at 55, I think it's only Makachev that gives him any problems.
Yep. I think well said. Now I remember the title.
And Oliveira, sorry. And Oliveira.
There we go.
Yeah.
So, Gentleman Chris Allen, I forgot that was your designation. Gentleman Chris Allen. What is your takeaway?
Yeah, man. I think we all knew what Volkanovski's game plan was meant to be. You're not going to stand up with Yair Rodriguez, man. I know he did and he outstruck him, but you don't want to be doing that for the whole fight. It's just not a good idea. And I was going to say what Callum said. When he took that takedown, it was beautiful, wasn't it? Yair didn't expect that, did he? He was like, right, I'm going to turn up and I'm going to maybe come back with something. And he just picked him up and his legs were flying in the air, man. It was typical. And then it was just how quickly then he's on top, just bang, 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 bang. It's just so quick. You don't even have I had to pretty much put it in slow motion. Guy's so quick, man. It's ridiculous. And it's just like basically having a tree trunk on top of you, really, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
He's like wider than he is tall. You know what I mean? So I think he's just a stocky guy, man. And yeah, man, have a British Commonwealth as well. That's what we like to see, mate. Keeping it in there, keeping it sort of British, I guess. But
That's right.
but But yeah, mate, doing what he did best. I think we all knew what was going to happen, and I'd like to see Rodriguez fight Topera next, and let what's his name Volkanovski go and get his surgery. He won't be out for long. He said he'll go get his surgery. He won't be out for too long. He said he wants to fight again this year. Let them two have it out, Yair and Topuria, and then fight the winner of that. Give Yair another go. But
yes,
obviously in the UFC's eyes, they want Topuria to probably win that fight.
yeah.
But he smashed it. Volkanovski, he is what he is, man. And I think if he moves up, God, imagine him fighting people like Poirier and Gaethje and stuff like that, man. Great fights, man. Could you imagine them fights, man? But he can't go down anymore because that'd be the best thing for him. But to go up, he's just going to have to deal with being the. Sorry, he's always dealt with being the smaller man, hasn't he? To be fair, it's no issue for him. I think he'd struggle against someone the same height as him. To be fair, and as you said, hips are a lot lower than their hips, so he can take them down a lot easier.
Absolutely.
So yeah, mate. Volkanovski will carry on winning. He's going to be one of them. He's going to keep winning and winning and winning, and we'll see what happens, mate. He reminds me of like a GSP style fighter, man.
Yeah.
And saying that, GSP's coming back in December. They announced, didn't they?
Yeah.
So that'd be interesting to see who he fights as well. I'm guessing he'll fight for a title more than likely. You know what I mean? But fight McGregor or something.
I think it's just grappling.
He's just going to be grappling. Yes.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's going to do some jiu-jitsu. Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever see him again.
Oh, I swear it said on the bottom of the screen, it says George St. Pierre returns to the UFC in 2023ry.
No,
they've probably done that as a marketing.
Well, there's a UFC invitational, which is grappling. That's what he said he was.
Right, that might be what it is then.
Yeah, I'm bollocks.
That'll be against that'll be against Khabib, man, guaranteed. Watch.
I would love to see it. My question is though, with Volkanovski getting surgery, would you figure they would serve Vegemite sandwiches in the hospital in Australia? And then the second question: are you mates in England eating Vegemite sandwiches as well, or only?
Why don't I know what Vegemite is?
Well, it's like this. To be honest, I've never tasted it. I've smelled it, and the smell alone was just like, "There's no way I'm eating that."
Yeah, some sort of barnacles or something unusual. No, yeast. Something with yeast. I spoke to one of my mates from Australia. Some sort of yeast.
Not pretty.
And apparently, you only put a bit of it. You don't put a lot of it on toast. You put a bit of it on. Yeah. I don't know. But the where we've heard of that was that famous song. Right, I come from a land down under. Right, that song 20 years ago. And then it says, she just smiled and made me a Vegemite sandwich. You have to go listen to that song.
I don't know what Vegemite is. I'm gonna Google it in a minute. No, I'm good, man. I'm good.
Just to go back on your suggestion, I've got a slightly different view. I think you do Topuria for the belt and Volkanovski. Let Makhachev have one more fight at 55 before you pair them two up again. Arnold Allen versus Yair Rodriguez.
Oh, that'd be a banger, wouldn't it?
That would be a banger. That would be brilliant. I'd love to see that. I hope that they do that because Allen deserves a good comeback. It's going to be interesting to see, though, because the gatekeeper for Volk is Max Holloway, just like the gatekeeper for Izzy was and may still be Robert Whittaker. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Let's do this for 5 minutes because we've gone a bit long. But my opinion here, if I can stop sniffling, is I'm going to give quick thoughts of like a minute for this coming up fights, and then maybe you guys do the same. So I see that we have Terrence McKinney, who's training now with Team Kevin Holland, a really great guy. I interviewed him about 5 weeks ago. He is a slight underdog here to Nazim Sadikov, and I think Terrence McKinney wins that fight. It's going to be a great fight. Terrence is going to come back after a loss, and I think is going to look really good. You also have Walt Harris back, which is interesting, against Josh Parisian. He should win. Then you have Atman Izatar back after getting smashed by Matt Frivola, and he's a slight dog to someone named Francisco Prado. Norma Dumont is back against Chelsea Chandler. I'll have to look more into Chandler on that, but Dumont is tough. And the main event, Mayra Bueno Silva, the Brazilian, against Holly Holm, the American, and Holly Holm, a fair favorite, about 1.5 to 1. Not a lot of names on this card. I think following a pay-per-view where they've bled out a bit of money, they've not bled that out. I think the three of us might have a chance of getting on this card if we were to really, or at least the two of you, if we would work hard. I'm a bit old for qualifying, but I can see if I can pass the medicals. Anyway, that is my thought there. You guys have any quick thought for a minute on any of those names? Any of those?
Yeah, man, it's an opportunist fight, card again. That's what I like about it. And there'll be some. I'm sure there's some contender series fighters in there as well.
Yeah,
it's an opportunist card. That's what I like about them. It's a bit of the unknown sort of fighters, and yeah, mate, we like to watch them and the up and comers or people coming back from losses. And they're always interesting cards to watch. And I think the one we had last week was epic. You know what I mean? Anyway, so they can be bangers, man. They can be, especially they're not big names, so they all start somewhere and they all start at that stage. So, man, I remember going back. I found an old UFC DVD where I think Cain Velasquez was on the undercard. You know what I mean? So things like that.
Love it.
So yeah, man. It's going to be a good one, and it's nice to see Holly Holm back as well. Definitely.
Excellent. In her 40s now. Callum, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Chris. I think the Holly Holm fight's the one that I think everyone's looking at, because if she wins in good fashion, then she becomes one of the fighters who fights for the vacant belt. So I think Holly goes out there and she proves a point. And I'll be honest, I think she goes and wins that belt. I can't think of anyone else in that division who beats her apart from Amanda. I don't. If it's Juliana Pena who's the other side, I think Holly beats Pena as well.
Could very well be. Would not be surprised at all. Would not be surprised. Well, I will give a wrap up here. We'll give you guys a wrap up. But first, I will say, actually, I'll say this, and I'll let you guys say where we can find you, and then I'll finish it off myself. But first, I would say, if the fights are bangers, in England, you must have your bangers and mash.
I knew you were going to say that.
Right. Although, do remember, cholesterol is a real thing. So you guys eating all that rich food in England, mates, be careful. Stop eating all that rich food all the time over there in England, mates. I want you guys to stay alive. We need you guys here in the world. So be careful. Not too much with the bangers and mash, right? Let's throw it over to Chris Allen. Where can we find you, Chris, and what are your final thoughts here?
Yeah, man, always a pleasure to have a chat, man. And I was really excited about this one today because it was such a banging card, man.
Yeah.
Do you know how many people I've rung during the day just to talk about this card? Because I've been busy. You know what I mean? I've been busy most of the day. I haven't been able to go and see anyone. So yeah, man. And yeah, just Chris Allen MMA on most platforms and Bloodline Fight Series. Check it out on YouTube, man. We've had one show. We have MMA and we have amateur and pro. And also we have a bit of K1 and boxing. So there's a bit of something there for everyone. All within a cage. Every now and then we do some 4-ounce boxing gloves as well, which is always good. Boxing fights, which is always good fun as well. So yeah, man, check it out. All fully professional, by the way. It's not like unlicensed. We've got like proper judges and medical teams. Yeah, man, check it out.
Great stuff and great fights over there at Bloodline Fights. And speaking about Bloodline, what are your bloodlines here as far as what you're involved with, Callum Sanderson?
Yeah, so on my other channel, Sanderson Show, did a watch along. Going to do some shows regarding UFC 290, what happens, some of the fighters going on next, and yeah, obviously on this channel as well. So you can find me at Callum Sanderson on all platforms as well.
Fantastic. And for me, MMA Power Hour, we do our show on Twitter Spaces. This is my additional pride and joy here on video. This is my pride and joy now, being that we're doing Twitter Spaces audio only for MMA Power Hour. So right here, MMA from London to LA. I am going to actually take an allergy medication before I do the show. I'm popping right out of bed to do this show, so I don't even have time. It wouldn't have worked anyway, although by this far in it may have. But I'm going to be mindful of that. But anyway, and then I'll also do some interviews sometimes for the UFE Ultimate Fan Experience and just basically my regular thing. I will say a funny thing is someone had approached me on Twitter after my saying that Moreno won and sent me some jiffy saying, I don't think you understand how MMA scoring works. And I thought of a brilliant response. I said, yeah, I think you may be right. I've only watched MMA for 30 years and trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, striking, and wrestling. But I think perhaps I don't understand how MMA scoring would work. And I said, in all honesty, I said, you're going to come at me that way? And then I put GTFO with a whole bunch of smiley faces. The next thing I knew, the guy's post was deleted. So people got to have some respect. I'm not saying I'm a know-it-all, but sometimes advice is, if you're a young guy, as I probably was, perhaps look and see who you're speaking with first before you tell someone that you don't think they understand the scoring of a sport that they were there from the beginning, being aware of and training in, and just a bit of advice. I hate to say, I think it may be more American young guys that like to talk that trash than English, although I'm sure there's a fair share in England. Anyway, I appreciate it. It makes you guys are the best. Callum, for Sir Callum Sanderson and gentleman Chris Allen, this is Lord Colin Crandall, and it was great to see you guys here. I hope you enjoy this episode of MMA from London to LA. We will see you soon. Peace.